You don't make it certain by using these umbilical cords leading us to the ground.
He reserved particular scorn for Harding's reliance on expansion bolts, permanent anchors that can be placed anywhere as a means of ascending blank stretches of rock.
If you put a bolt in the rock anywhere you want, you're going to get to the top. I hate to see anything take away from that part of climbing, which you have to overcome with what's inside of you.
Royal, he's the guy who dreamed up and wrote down the rules of the game the rest of us play.
Nobody would ever think of going up on a climb and not try to do it in the Robbins style, except for Warren Harding, of course.
Harding did most of his philosophizing in the bar.
Harding himself was ticking off a list of hard climbs, with little regard for Robbins' rulebook,
Harding was drilling bolts all over the place.
and a refined sense of the absurd.
He would describe climbs he was doing as a great farce, really ridiculous.
Every climb I do is a farce, so why not have fun?
He founded the Lower Sierra Eating, Drinking, and Farsing Society, devoted to gluttony and sloth. It was a reaction against the whole high-minded ideals of climbing.
He often described Royal Robbins as way too serious. And he always considered Robbins and his people to be the Valley Christians. The Valley Christians expected everyone to climb exactly as they climb.
Does that annoy me? Did it? Yes. Yes. That was a derisive comment.
To be Royal and to have this vulgar nutcase trying to undermine this beautiful world you're trying to create, it must have been deeply annoying. And for Harding, to have this buzzed-headed square, his little crew of acolytes, this rule and that rule, they must have driven each other crazy.
Oh, yeah, they were just at each other's throats.
After more than a decade of discord and one-upmanship, the final confrontation between Robbins and his arch-rival, Warren Harding, came in 1970.
Robbins has been running the show, doing one sensational, important climb after another. Harding was itching to do another big El Cap route.
Harding's eyes were drawn to the only stretch of El Capitan that Robbins had never climbed.
The last major big blank area on El Cap.
The wall of the early morning light, or the dawn wall.
But for Yosemite's philosopher-in-chief, the dawn wall was off limits.
It looked too blank, like it would require too many bolts.
Harding said, fuck it, I'll do it my way as usual. Nobody's telling me what to do.
And with a bag of bolts in tow, Harding commenced his attack on the dawn wall.
With everybody waiting down below on the ground, Harding is up there just drilling one bolt after another, just drawing a line up El Cap with bolts.
The king will sing, take my body.
This is absolutely anathema to the aesthetic sensibility of Royal Robbins.
I was rather disappointed, but I thought, well, that's what you would expect from Warren.
But this time, Harding did take one page from the Robbins rulebook, using no fixed ropes to the ground and climbing the wall in a single upward push with his partner, Dean Caldwell.
Warren was pretty excited about the idea of just going as light as we could and doing the whole climb in one stretch.
They expected the trip to last about 12 days. But by the end of the second week, they were only halfway up the wall with their supplies dwindling when storm clouds began to gather.
And we figured, well, let's just hang out until a storm comes. And we'd open up a bottle of brandy. We didn't realize how much of a storm was coming.
Concern builds on the valley floor that these guys must be trapped up there because they just haven't moved.
The Park Service became nervous, and the decision was made to put everybody in place for a rescue.
Did they ask for a rescue? No.
We'd never thought about a retreat, never even considered it. The only thing we'd ever considered was going to the top.
But the rescue plan went forward without the consent of the two climbers on the wall.
Harding essentially screamed down, "The hell with you guys, get lost. We don't want to rescue."
We finished the bottle of wine and started making a battle plan. We're going to fight them off if they come.
A can came rattling down, and there was a message in it. A rescue is unwanted, unwarranted, and will not be accepted. And that called off the rescue.
The media just loved this.
Two climbers, Warren Harding and Dean Caldwell,
have been climbing the sheer face of the mountain.
have waved off a helicopter carrying would-be rescuers.
And they brought Harding's mother along, and she's underneath the wall. And she says, "Oh, this is the longest Warren he's been away from home."
After a record-setting 28 days on the wall, Harding made his final push to the summit.
A lot of us thought that he wasn't going to make it, but he was just determined.
The Iron Man of Yosemite. And even Royal couldn't have done that.
Where's there? They must be there. Are they there? They're standing up.
They did it.
Come on, yeah.
Awaiting their arrival atop El Capitan was a mind-blowing sight.
There was a whole army of reporters on the top. You would have thought like the Beatles had just shown up from England for the first time.
Why in God's green earth do you guys climb mountains?
Because we're insane. Can't be any other reason.
Harding becomes the most famous climber in American history.
Climbing 3,000 feet. Dean Caldwell and Warren Harding are with me in the studio now. What was the actual quote that you wound up barking down to the would-be rescuers?
Well, I don't think you want that terminology at this particular time.
In any event, you were dramatic.
While Harding toured the country, basking in the limelight, back in Camp 4, Robbins fumed.
Royal Robbins finds this absolutely unbearable.
I believed that Harding was not doing it the right way.
He was furious. The number of bolts.
I think they placed something like 300 bolts. It was either up to me to do something or to keep my trap shut. So I decided to act.
Royal started up the dawn wall with a chisel, determined to remove a blot from the Yosemite landscape.
And he stops at the first bolt and chops it off. He stops at the next one, he chops that one off. I said, "Royal, what are you doing?" He says, "Chopping the bolts, that's the name of the game."
Royal trying to make a tremendous statement, obviously. Harding, you better never ever do that kind of shit again. Or I'll go up the day after you get down and I'll chop every fucking bolt.
Royal's belief in his own sense of right and wrong boiled over into a destructive act, a bitter act. But an interesting thing happens, which is that Royal gets not very far up the climb before the sort of undeniable beauty of the climb seems to overwhelm him.
On the upper pitches of the Dawn Wall, Robbins found that Warren Harding didn't just rely on bolts. It was bold, creative climbing.
He said, "You know, this route is a lot more difficult than I imagined."
I was just pushed to my limit to follow his leads. And I was overcome by admiration for the level of expertise. Warren Harding, he was climbing at an inspired level. And so I thought, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't feel right. And so I stopped removing him at that point, and I decided to just go ahead and climb it, leave the rest of the bolts in.
Royal, it was pretty hard for him to come to humility, but he finally did. And I think the Dawn Wall was the turning point for him.
It's hard to admit it, but I have to say that I think some of my reaction was Harding was getting all the credit. And I felt I should get some. And that was a personal thing. I suppose it was an ego thing, yeah.
The clash of egos on the Dawn Wall took its toll on these two aging gladiators. And neither Harding nor Robbins would ever climb a major route in Yosemite again.
They both dropped out of climbing. A rivalry, which had gone on for 14 years, came to an end.
Robbins and his wife, Liz, went on to found a successful outdoor clothing company. Meanwhile, Harding passed his days on the porch with Mom, drink always in hand.
Remember how low we were on the Dawn Wall in El Cap in Yosemite?
Yeah.
And I'm rich and famous. Well,
Rich? Where's the rich?
That's it.
As Yosemite's golden age came to an end, the cultural rift in America was growing wider.
I mean, we're talking about the early 70s, Jimi Hendrix and Watergate. Vietnam was dribbling on, and there was a lot of discontent. There wasn't really much to hold on to.
There was an alternative society sort of developing that scared the hell out of the government because it was changing the culture.
Even the national parks felt the impact, as raucous love-ins from the Bay Area spilled over into the meadows of Yosemite.
It's just two cultures who are really in conflict here.
It seemed like the valley was ripe for the next revolution. In the early 1970s, a fresh crop of climbers began to trickle into Yosemite.
When I was just a kid, they said, "Kid, don't you cry."
Right around 73 or 74, we started coming to the valley.
In Camp Ford, we started all connect as a group.
We were a little cocky tribe.
We just came on the scene.
The new group of hippie athletes included John Long.
I was about that far away from abject poverty.
Dale Bard.
I didn't have any money, any food, anything.
Dean Fidelman.
What we had was a lot of style and a lot of balls.
Ron Kalk.
There's a feeling that you get being here.
John Backer.
I climb on the average 300 days a year.
And the promising 16-year-old Lynn Hill.
It was definitely a macho culture. Lots of testosterone. If you wanted to hang with these guys, you had to climb hard.
The wise elder of this new valley clan was Jim Bridwell.
Bridwell, their leader.
Ultimately, the coolest climber there is.
Amidst the grand events of the 1960s, Bridwell was a young apprentice to Robbins and Harding.
This brash kid looked a little bit like Alfred E. Newman with big fucking ears sticking out.
But the scrawny kid at the picnic table would soon grow into a leader of the Yosemite climbers.
He had climbed with Robbins. He had climbed with everyone. That passion and commitment was something that we were looking for.
Bridwell drove routes into stretches of El Capitan where Robbins and Harding never dared.
Jim Bridwell was some kind of new force, if you will.
New routes on El Cap, bold, dangerous stuff.
For me, it's mainly a thing about, how far you can push it. Exploring not only my environment, but myself at the same time.
While blazing trails on the... In 1975, Bridwell devised a plan to attempt a feat that only a few years earlier would have been a fantasy.
Bridwell came up with the idea, we'll climb the nose on El Capitan in a day.
Yosemite's most iconic route, the nose, had taken Warren Harding nearly 2 years to complete, and Royal Robbins almost a week. Now Bridwell aimed to climb all 3,000 feet in a single day.
Are you kidding me?
Leaving behind the food, water, and equipment for a multi-day climb, he chose to go fast and light in a mad dash for the summit. By evening, Bridwell and his team stood atop El Capitan.
I think the important thing is to get down before the bar closed.
Leaving no doubt that Yosemite's new crew intended to leave their mark.
Take no prisoners and get out of the fucking way. Here we are.
Before long, Bridwell's disciples were becoming masters in their own right.
We were running on adrenaline and uncontainable ambition.
We wanted to set new standards.
Every time that we went climbing, it wasn't just to raise the bar. The idea was to blow the whole paradigm away and replace it with an entirely new game, a new way to climb.
The breakthrough for our generation was free climbing.
Free climbing revolutionized the sport. What can we do just with our hands and feet?
In the previous generation, aid climbing was the norm, with climbers relying on their equipment to hold their body weight as they ascended a cliff.
Put a nail in the rock, put a nylon ladder to it, climb the ladder, and repeat that process.
Getting direct assistance from the gear.
Free climbing changed everything.
Now, climbers hung directly by their fingertips in a strenuous vertical dance.
When you're free climbing, you're using your hands and feet on the rock.
You have to stuff your fingers in the cracks, smear your toes, periodically placing protection.
Only use your rope to catch you if you fell off.
You're looking up at small holds and not sure if you really have the strength. Burning forearms, your fingers starting to open, and you just have to go for it.
Free climbing demanded a new level of athleticism, which the valley climbers honed on steep cliffs and boulders.
Bridwell's crew, these guys were dynamite athletes, pushing the physical limits of Yosemite climbing in their era.
All we did was eat, sleep, climb. That's it, okay? And train.
Worked out like fiends.
Always trying to get stronger.
You had to have fingers of steel, zero body fat.
But even more than that was the mental aspect of it.
Let me know when you're gonna cut loose.
It was really a bold era.
Camera rolling, run cow.
Pushing the level of free climb became a real focus. Leader never falls, man, because you're gonna feel it.
Using the crack as a step, he pushes up. And then the rock breaks off.
You okay? Yeah, just a little loophole. Scared me to death.
Our focus was to find out what was possible for ourselves. That's what took our imaginations more than anything.
United around the new free climbing movement, this core group of rock jocks soon had a name: the Stone Masters.
Yeah, dude, the Stone Masters.
Being a Stone Master meant that you had to climb like it's your last day on Earth. And you had to smoke lots of weed.
The name Stone Masters came out of a bong session in the basement of Richard Harrison's house.
Some people would say stoned masters.
We were young, wild, and
Well, I think they were doing the right thing. I was pretty stoked. They were pushing the limits and also really pissing off the entrenched status quo.
Sex, drugs, rock and roll, climbing.
Living on the naked brink of society, of sanity.
Camp 4 was a dirty, filthy mud hole. It was paradise.
We camped together. We trained together. We climbed together.
Our little group moving through the boulders with our little tape deck playing. Somehow we came to this beautiful place and it connected us.
Kind of a magical, real special time to be in Yosemite climbing.
We were in Utopia. We were basically the kings of Utopia.
The climbers had it in their mind that Yosemite had evolved for them. It wasn't to have this proliferation of cafeterias and tourist things. No, man, the main feature about Yosemite was the rocks. And who was utilizing those rocks? It was us. That place was for us.
But that's not how the national park saw things.